Hey nature lovers, it's Kayla, and welcome to Nature Will Nurture. So today I'd like to share some tips and tricks and things to expect when you bring plants into your home, and especially those low light areas so that you can grow in any space in your home. Now you might ask, what makes me qualified to give you these tips and tricks? Well, I have taken care of probably over 1,000 plants in various locations. I take care of plants in offices and in hotels, hospitals, you name it. And so I've made a lot of observations over the past year and a half that I've been working there, and also obviously the extra amount of time I've been studying houseplants prior to that. I just wanted to share those observations with you. So first, what to expect. When you bring a new plant into your house from the greenhouse, it's quite a bit of a change. So if you can, ideally, start it off in a place where it's got brighter light and then gradually move it to that lower light area. But if you're a little short on space and you have to just move it straight into that low light area, this is what to expect. You might expect to see some loss of the lower leaves. First, they tend to yellow, then they tend to turn brown and crunchy, and you can just pull those off. Depending on the plant, you may have to prune it to keep it more bushy, or if it's more of a tree-like form, like a Dracaena, then that just is natural. Another thing to keep in mind is the risk of overwatering. If it's a plant that just came from the greenhouse, and you bring it into a low light situation, it tends to drink less. In those first initial maybe up to a month, keep a very close eye on if it needs water or if it should dry out a bit further. Some other things that you might expect, say the plant comes in and it's very damp and it stays damp for a couple weeks, you might get some leaf spots. One last thing to expect is that the new growth that will come in may be smaller. The good thing about this new growth though, typically, it's not always a good thing, but typically it is a good thing because that foliage is better well adapted to the environment that you've placed it in. So it will do better long term because of that. Aglaonemas are a perfect example. They grow fast enough. They're not known to be fast growers, but they grow fast enough that their new foliage comes in better well adapted than the foliage they got while they were growing in the greenhouse, or from whatever tropical area they had come from originally. Now with that being said, I have some recommendation on plants to use. Typically you want to stick with plants that are considered low light tolerant. ZZ plants, snake plants, pothos, sometimes philodendrons, dark leaf dracaenas, wider leaf varieties like Janet Craig, Carmen, Lisa, Elegance, and things like that. Marginata does not do very well in low light, usually. You'll be lucky if you find one that will do well. You have to very well adapt it. Aglaonemas, especially the green varieties like Silver Bay, Maria, those varieties, they tend to be better well adapted because of the green in their leaves. Don't go for the colored variety, those need more light, though they are pretty. Aglaonemas are probably my #1 recommendation for a long-term low light area, because as the new growth comes in, it's better well adapted. Some other plants to consider are calatheas, ferns, peace lilies, they're a very good example. Those just require a little bit more watering, so don't put those in places where you're not going to get to them very frequently. Keep that in mind when placing your plants and choosing your plants. They often recommend ZZ and snake plants for low light, and I will often receive them in my accounts. But what I've noticed over the long term is that those plants, when they begin to grow again, because initially they come in, gorgeous and perfect, but as the new growth comes in, it tends to be thinner, weaker, scraggly, but they'll come in funky and not strong. And there's also the chance of overwatering that plant if you're not very careful and very neglectful of the plant. So what I better recommend for long-term purposes, like I'd say more than a year, ZZs and snake plants should be in more of a medium to bright, even direct sunlight. They do much better, much happier. The growth is thick and robust, and there's a big difference. Also, when it comes to fertilizing in low light, I would recommend not really fertilizing too much in low light, unless you're going organically, because that's more gentle. But if you're going with the chemical version of fertilizer, I wouldn't recommend necessarily fertilizing. You'd probably be safer just repotting whenever it's time to repot, and that fertilizer that's in that soil will hopefully sustain a plant until the next time it needs repotting. Because fertilizer can cause it to grow quicker than it's ready for, and it comes out lanky, also weak and scraggly kind of looking growth, so not always recommended. Or you risk burning the leaves as well and burning the roots. So if you're going to have a plant in a low-light area, maybe try looking up organic versions of fertilizer. So some environmental conditions around your house can affect the way your plant needs water as well. And I've had to learn this over time, observing the different areas in which I take care of plants individually. So some of those things include vents. If there is an air vent or heat vent nearby, that can change the way the watering is. If there are any cold drafts, especially cold drafts, certain plants like dracaenas are very cold sensitive. I've seen cold damage on an aglaonema before as well. So if that is something you can avoid, I would do that, but if not, there are other plants, and do research on those types of plants as to what will work well and in that low light area. I know snake plants tend to be that way. I'd have to look up other ones. Pothos seem to be a little bit more tolerant, but they do not look necessarily happy when they're in cold drafts. Another thing to consider is that spot a main thoroughway? For instance, in my home, the center of the house is actually sort of a long hallway, and so I don't put any plants there, particularly because my cats like to run up and down that long hallway, and I don't want them knocking something over. And it's also where we walk, so I don't want to trip over something in the middle of the night. If you're hanging plants from the ceiling, keep in mind that hot air rises, and that will make the plant dry out faster. In our house, we actually have ceiling air vents, so it's a double whammy for my plants. It's hot up there and the air is blowing on them, so I do have to keep an eye on my plants that are hanging from the ceiling. And finally, with this tip, consider what's around the area that you want to place the plant. Is there a computer nearby? Be careful. Do you tend to keep papers in that area, because you will guarantee that you make a mess when you're watering your plant. If there's carpet or furniture around, be mindful of that when you're watering. If you have a nice wide headboard and a window behind your bed like we do, I keep one plant up there. I'm afraid my cats will knock it over or will knock it over in the middle of the night, and so I only have one plant on our headboard and a window. I would also be afraid of hanging plants above my bed, because you can make a mess when you're watering, or something happens and it comes down. So dirt everywhere. So it can also cause damage to wood tables, and so be mindful of those areas. And then lastly, I would like to encourage you to also bring in some lights. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to mean a specific grow light, but there are some attractive grow lights out there these days. But you can even use a daylight spectrum regular light bulb from where you normally would buy light bulbs from. Just try to keep it more on the Kelvin spectrum, as close to 5,000 as you can. I have a hard time finding them any higher than 5,000. They go up to about 6,500, but then it gets to be pretty blue light. So 5,000 is still attractive to our eyes, but it's the most beneficial light for the plants if you're going on the more affordable route. You also want to keep in mind when buying those regular light bulbs the wattage. You want to get bulbs that have a higher wattage, just because they'll be brighter. And then also it depends on how far away you're keeping it from the plant, and that is a video that I could spend more time on if that's something that you'd be interested in. I can also go over the various grow lights I have around my house and things that I would like to try out. So again, if that's something of interest, let me know. And so if you have any questions, feel free to comment down below with those questions. You can also message me on Instagram at Nature Will Nurture, or on Facebook, Nature Will Nurture. I have a lot of experience taking care of plants, and I love plants, so I'm open to any questions you might have. If you like this video, please like it. Feel free to also subscribe to my channel for more content like this in the future. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.